Hi, everybody. Some of this will be, many of you in this room could probably talk about this just as much or more than me, but I'm the messenger on this, I guess, today. I work at Pinnacles National Park. It's a very beautiful place to work. That's where it's located in relation to where we are today. And it's pretty. But we're here to talk about stinkwort. Stinkwort was first introduced in this area that's already been covered, and then has moved often on roadways from there. And as we know, it is really often associated with gravel, among other road fill and things like that. So in San Benito County, in 1998, it was a big El Nino year, and there was big flooding events and huge rainfall events, and that caused a lot of structural damage in the county. Okay. So we had major flooding in the county, and it washed out a road and a bridge at Pinnacles, and it also caused a major slump, mudslide and washout on Highway 25 in Piscinas north of the park. So at the park, with the road washout over the next, it took a little over a year or two, but they put in a new bridge. And to build that bridge, they brought in a bunch of fill material. And from a quarry. And that infestation, that material brought in an infestation of stinkwort. It wasn't discovered right away. It took a few years to figure out what was going on. And in that time, it moved down the creek. Something wrong. So now we at Pinnacles are lucky in working for the National Park Service that we have a weed crew, and we have more resources at hand than some land managers do. So we were able to treat that pretty consistently for about, it took a few years to be discovered, but for about 15 or 20 years, it's been consistently treated. But that one introduction with consistent treatment for at least 15 years is still showing occasional individuals. So still finding scattered individuals in the creek. Oops. We also had that road slump in Highway 25 shown here. This is from 1998. You could see it was an area already prone to failure. And I couldn't find any images of the actual failure, but I could find one from 2003 after they did the work. And there it is. So this is the same section in 2003. And you can see here that they put in a whole bunch of road materials. And what that was is a whole bunch of gravel and rock and fill from the same quarry that they used at Pinnacles. So this also led to an infestation along the roadway. And the San Benito Weed Management Area noticed it at about 2010, so about 10 years after it had happened. And they did a treatment out there. That's Weed Management Area members, but not that year, but that was the image I had. They sprayed it once, and there's been mowing since, but as you can see, they did not get rid of the infestation. That was just from Google Earth from this year. And I can tell you I was driving through there, and there's like much bigger dead little Christmas trees. So I thought that maybe they wouldn't have grown, but they actually did grow into pretty full-sized individuals in there. So treatment, 1-year treatment with herbicide, but no follow-up, pretty ineffective. So that Highway 25 slump where they brought in all that material was right next to the creek. And that is the first place that we have documentation it being noted. in the region. However, it seems to have spread from that point up and down the creek. And you see those two orange areas, those are quarry sites that weren't really active until around the early 2000s in the creek. So what we seem to have is sort of a feedback loop between quarries, creek beds, and roads in the area. This is the recorded points on CalFlora of it now. And there's those quarry locations, and those dots there are mostly not on the road, they're in the creek. So, and then from there, those infested quarry sites, of course, have the potential for more spread. So we've been really focused. We're lucky to have pretty good control over most of the internal lands of the park. We own all our own roads and maintain them at this point. And so we have more ability to control the inside of the park than many of you may, but still, we still have a number of challenges. But to keep it out of Pinnacles, these are things that many of you guys have already covered, but we inspect all equipment coming in or moving between sides of the park. We inspect and approve all aggregate sources for the park. We require weed-free hay for our stock. We inspect and vet all of our other materials entering the park and survey neighboring lands, especially upstream. And to do this, the fact that we have a weed management area partnership has been really critical. So I just want to call out this resource on CalIPSI on aggregate quarry programs if you want to try and set up your own. So I have inspected all the quarries that have been suggested through our maintenance staff in the area for approval. So in a way, my program, I would consider it more informal. Yosemite is really one in California park that's really spearheaded this this program, and we're a big part of creating that guide. And I have several of them here if you'd like to look at it. And you're welcome to take them. I brought 5 just in case folks would like to. Now they are such a big actor that they have the ability to kind of work with some of the local quarries and actually work with them to do the treatment. Now I don't have as much power to do that. So instead, what I've done is inspect all the quarries and find ones that are the least weedy options. So you do need to re-inspect them periodically though, because they can get it at any time. And one issue that I came up with is the storage yards versus the quarry itself. One company I found has a clean quarry, dirty storage yard. So here's an example of just like my little informal rating system. Okay. So I go to the sites, I call them up. One part that has been helpful for making this successful with our maintenance staff is that I really prioritize doing this as quickly as possible when they need their aggregate materials. We've got a contractor that wants to bring something in, so that at least that it's less inconvenient for them. So I'll drop whatever I can, if I can, and do it as quickly as I can within schedules, if there's a new source. And a lot of them, most of them, I'd say at least half of them have had stinkwort. And then other ones have had other weeds of concern as well that we really don't want in there. But all of them have some weeds, but some of them have better weed practices and some of them have fewer weeds or less worrisome weeds. So what I have found for me personally is it also really depends on your site and what you already have present and what you're worried about. And so it is kind of individual. I think there was an effort, there has been an effort in San Benito County or Monterey County to look at a weed-free quarry program, which is awesome. It's really hard to do, I can tell you, for a general sort of certification. But it's much simpler if you know your site. So we have one preferred quarry that is relatively clean. There's also a few other practices you can do. Some quarries can heat treat aggregate to kill some weeds. It's usually costs more. We request rock be crushed on demand. Washed rock is often less weedy. And buried aggregate is less of a concern. However, really remember to ask where they're going to stage that material, because that can be huge. That can negate the fact that, yeah, it's going to be buried under, capped under a whole bunch of, something else. But yeah. And then a limitation and challenge for us is that even though we have good control within the park, we have, highways that come up to and border the park and neighboring lands. So, one big challenge is that there is a proposal to drastically reduce the use of herbicide in general in California for the state. They'd like to, it's a goal, but there's not really a lot of protocols to use weed-free gravel for organizations like First Caltrans, or even for our county roads, which are often operating under limited budgets. Sometimes they have BMPs, sometimes they don't, but it's also sometimes hard for them to maintain their BMPs. So at Pinnacles, we have there's 2 roadwork introductions that have occurred right adjacent to the park that are out of my control. And efforts to get them to treat it, they've sometimes said they'll try and do it, and it's fallen through every time. So I guess eternal vigilance is the solution. Besides that, so that's it for me.
Are there any questions from online?
Online.
Okay, then Mona, hold on a second.
Hey, Amelia, it's great to see what you're doing there at Pinnacles. I worked for the Point Reyes Roads project a couple years ago, and they actually paid to have me go look at quarries in Sonoma County. So those of you in Sonoma County, there's plenty of stinkwort in there. There was one quarry that was okay, but across the street was a stinkwort nightmare. And they also sent me to one in Tuolumne County, believe it or not. I hope they didn't use that one to truck from Point Reyes, but they had stinkwort also. So I would say, given what Amelia has shown us, that you should expect there to be weeds, but it's good to know what weeds, and some weeds are worse than others. So it's good to just know what's happening and control it as best you can.
I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit on what it means to inspect equipment, and I'm assuming that includes vehicles, and what you do if you notice things like globs of mud stuck under the chassis.
Okay, so we do, but we don't inspect visitors' vehicles. So that's like a big, but all the equipment that comes into the park for construction projects we do, and PG&E we inspect too. And so we look really thoroughly at the vehicle. So first of all, they're often one thing is we know from experience that we have to tell contractors in advance that we have higher standards of cleanliness than they are used to working with. Many places say clean equipment, but they still come in with mud clumps on their equipment and they think of it as clean. They're not trying to just trick us. It's the cleanliness standards they're used to working with. Second thing, sometimes the visible parts are clean and the underside they have not gotten to. So we definitely have to inspect thoroughly on the undersides of the vehicles to look for that. Then what we make them do is leave the park and clean it. Sometimes they've had, you know, sometimes seen them like on a pullout, like spraying it down with another truck. That's not really what we'd like ideally like, but you know, that's, yeah. So inspecting it means you meet them at the entrance of the park before they unload any equipment. You go and you really thoroughly look at it, but you could train, you know, this is not rocket science. And, you know, it's good for you if you are a knowledgeable land manager to do it at first, or work with people, you know, if you have some folks that are other construction folks, or other staff, you can have them do it with you, and you sort of show them how to really thoroughly inspect it where you're looking under. And then we've often send them out to go wash it again. But contractors that have worked with us more than once know our standards, and then they just come with it clean. So it's not a huge deal, that part. Yeah.
Serena?
I think this is related to your last question, but have you had any pushback or resistance to inspection? And there's another question. How do you know when there are road projects outside of the park?
Okay. How do I know when there are road projects outside of the park? Those are known because, like, if they're going to happen, or if they are, once they've happened. Sometimes we get notifications about road projects outside the park simply because they, you know, will let people around know. But frequently we don't. And so we just find out when they're happening. So, however, Caltrans is a part of or has been a part of our weed management area, nominally at least. And we have a contact that I have, you know, has sometimes been able to give some information. And so, but one thing I found is many times people think about weeds in terms of landscaping materials, but very little consciousness about weeds when it comes to the materials being used in construction, and also mowing and spreading with mowing. Here, some of those other points I suspect were spread by mowing, and then others obviously by air and vehicles as well. So
We're going to take one final question.
Yeah, you mentioned after the initial introduction in the creek area, you treated it for 15 years and it still persisted. What kind of procedure did you use in those treatments?
we just used hand pulling. They weren't huge infestations, and we just hand pulled it, and it's in the creek. So it's good thing is it's easy to yank it out of gravel. But we do have a partner that we got another little infestation upstream of the park recently. And it turned out that a partner had a little dammed reservoir that had an infestation on it that we didn't know about that. And through our weed management area, we're able to go treat there, and there we've used herbicide. So